Hello, 10th grade. This is Mr. Smith. Miss you guys. Hope y'all are doing well. This is the keynote, the slides for ancient Sparta. And I thought what I'd do is just talk through these slides, provide the notes, so that everyone, no matter where we were in this unit, you'll have access to all of it. In RenWeb, if you'll follow directions to go where you're supposed to go to take a look at homework or scheduled tests and to get documents, I've put in an updated outline for Sparta in a PDF in RenWeb for 10th grade history. So you'll want to make sure you have that PDF. It's Sparta, the Warrior Society, Unit 7, Ancient Civ outline. So make sure you have that as we go through the slides. So I'm going to begin right now, and this is Sparta, Birth of a Legend. Sparta was a warrior society. Their chief rival was the Athenians or Athens. Sparta fought their rival in the Peloponnesian Wars, or I should say Peloponnesian War. And Sparta's height of their power was when they defeated Athens in the Peloponnesian War. That war took place between 431 and 404 BC. Peloponnesian is Peloponnesian. Okay, now I'm going to go to the second slide. Lacedaemon was the mythical king of Laconia, who married the princess Lady Sparta, after whom the city, Sparta, got its name. Lacedaemonia was another name for the region, Laconia, and Sparta is the capital in that region. Now, if you look at the outline, you'll see that I also have for Roman numeral 2, letter E, the word laconic. And the word laconic has come down through the centuries to us and is used in the English language, and it means to speak in a concise way. And we get this word and its meaning from the fact that the Athenians described the people from Laconia as being people who didn't use a lot of words, and they spoke very concisely. Okay. Also, if you look at Roman numeral 2, there's a footnote under Lacedaemonia where I explain better the relationship between Laconia, Lacedaemon, and Sparta. So in the footnote, it says Sparta is the city, or like more properly, the township of the Spartans. Lacedaemon is the Spartan city-state, and Thucydides, the Greek historian, used that term to describe the Spartan city-state. And a city-state is it's the location of the capital, but it's also more of a political term. It means the entire entity of their political life, the different classes, and the different branches, and the way that they applied their constitution. Okay. Laconia is the southeastern part of the Peloponnese, so basically Spartan territory then, excluding Messenia. Remember the Messenians were next door to the Spartans, and so they end up going to war, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, Messenia is where the Helots come from. All right. So if you'll take a look at the very bottom of that footnote or close to it, it says, so you could say that Laconia contains Lacedaemon, okay, which contains Sparta. And it says there in that footnote that the practice of using these terms were kind of fuzzy, just like my instruction was on this a few days ago. But I hope that helps some, okay? The Lacedaemons it's the name of the mythical king of that region, but it's also the term used to describe the people. That's the people of that region. Okay, so let's move on now to the next slide. You'll see there Lacedaemonia, which I said, in historical times was the proper name of the Spartan city-state as used by Thucydides in his histories. And the Lacedaemons are the people of Lacedaemonia. All right, so you see there at the bottom in the red, that is the region that we're talking about. Okay, now, related to all these L words is the Spartan shield and their primary symbol. Other groups of people knew them by this shield and this symbol, which they would paint an inverted V on the front of their shields, which is the symbol, the letter for L in Greek. Okay, L being lambda, and the uppercase L is the inverted V. All right. The Spartans used red to paint these on the shield, and it was to identify with the people of Lacedaemonia, which in historical times was the proper name of the Spartan state, like we mentioned, used by Thucydides. Okay? All right, now that kind of sets them up. How did they get there? How did the Spartans get to this area? Because they're actually descendants of another group of people who came into that region, and that's the Dorians. And we've talked about the local school who used to be the Dorians. Okay, the Spartans were descendants of the Dorians. The Dorians were really rough and tumble people, and we're on Roman numeral 4, letter A. Their descendants are Spartans. The Dorians began like in northern and northwestern Greece around Macedonia, and that's where they originate and start their migration into Greece proper. Okay, now regarding their migrations, remember they're moving in, they're part of the original Greeks who eventually have, one of the greatest civilizations the world has known. Okay, so in these migrations from the north, they sweep southward through the Attica Peninsula and the Peloponnese. And then towards the end of the Bronze Age, Dorians are considered like one of the main factors that brought about the Bronze Age collapse, and consequently the end of the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. All right. So remember, we said our Bronze Age collapse date was 1177 BC. So that's kind of the time that we're talking about here. But also, I was looking up and I read from a few historians. They mentioned that actually the collapse, of course, like most historical events, took place not on a specific date, a specific year, but over a course of time. So most historians say that the Bronze Age collapse began around 1250 BC and lasted through 1100 BC. Okay, the Dorians were rough and tumble, low culture, no interest in governance, into conquest, and not very culturally advanced. So you can kind of see how Sparta comes honestly by their interest in being a militarized state. They do, however, the Dorians introduce one technological advantage, and that is the iron slashing sword. Okay, and I don't know if every class got to see the video of the gentleman cutting through metal with his iron slashing sword, but I think I shared with y'all that it was such a unique contribution to weaponry during this time because of its length, which made it very portable, and because of its strength, the metal use, its strength, and because of how sharp it could be. So anyway, it kind of becomes prevalent in that region. It was used by the Dorians, and they bequeath it to the Spartans, okay, their descendants. All right, let's see. So I'm on Roman numeral 4, number 5 now. Okay, so the Dorians are in, then comes the collapse, and then it takes about 3 centuries later before we actually see the reemergence of a more stable Greek culture. And remember, we talked about this coming out of the Bronze Age collapse. We marked that by Homer's poetry and also the geometric period in pottery. All right. So Greek city-states then began to be formed, and there are some cities that really their origin comes from the Dorian people, and then they become greater cities. Okay, so 3 cities I wanted you to know of Doric origin that were 3 of many all across that region, going up to the Black Sea and through the Balkans, and then even over in Anatolia. Everything comes back to Anatolia. Okay. All right. So the 3 cities of Doric origin: Sparta, Corinth, and Argos. Just want you to know those 3. Okay. Now, let's talk about. Okay, you'll see that's the Dorian slide there. Let's talk about now the militarization of Spartan society. Okay, one thing that we see early with the Spartans is how they respond to this period of colonization that occurred around the 700s BC as Greeks spread out, and that there was like a population boom. They needed more room. They were displaced for good reasons, looking to expand trade, find land to farm. But also, we also know that there were other reasons why they were displaced, and some of those were not great. And so it could have been, things like natural disasters or famine, not enough food. So anyway, you have a spread then of the Greeks all across sort of the Mediterranean region, Aegean Sea area, and the Spartans respond to this colonization not by welcoming in people, but by conquering the areas around them, expanding their territory, and then protecting themselves. Okay, so in a sense, they were colonizers in a violent way during a period of greater colonization. All right, and one group that they take over. Oh, there's the baby. That's Mr. Rich's child. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, they one of the groups that they take over and they have a protracted war with are the Messenians. All right, and they're like their next door neighbors to the Spartans, and they conquer them. All right. Remember, I shared with you like the Dorian Spartans versus the Achaean Messenians, and the first battle erupted into a long 20-year war. The Spartans were victorious, but then 40 years later, there was another war with the Messenians. Sparta was again victorious, and in such a thorough way, the Messenians were just done for. And so all the Messenians then were enslaved by Sparta, and they become known as Helots. Okay, I'm on Roman numeral 5, letter C. So Helots are Messenian slaves, okay, and they were the backbone of Spartan society. They did everything except fight in the army and run business or commerce, okay? And that brings us now to like 3 different castes or classes of Spartan society, of which the Helots were one of those, okay? Now this slide's going to be awesome, so check it out. Hot, boom, okay? Now, the Spartiates, that's right, I said Spartiates, were the soldiers. The Perioikoi were the sellers, and then the Helots were the slaves. Now, I think some of you remember I said that the Helots outnumbered the Spartiates and the Perioikoi 7-1. So if you combined all the soldiers and sellers together, the Helots still outnumbered them 7-1, which always made the possibility of slave revolt something in the mind of the Spartans. Okay, so there we have a cool slide. LT at the bottom, combined revolt. Okay, because there was somewhere between 7 to 10 Helots for every one Spartan. All right, Sparta then becomes, and this is part of their historical rationale, they become a hyper militarized state. Okay, they focused on being great warriors. All of the males had to participate as soldiers, to put down and to be ready for any slave revolts. And revolts could be brought about by purely discontentment for the conditions they lived in, or some of the revolts were brought about, and if you look at the top of page 3, I believe, no, page 4, letter B, page 4, letter B, some of the revolts were actually caused by Athens and foreign antagonism. They would encourage uprisings. They would tell runaway slaves that they would take them into Athens. And anyway, it was a way to destabilize Sparta, so Athens could kind of keep the upper hand. And the rivalry between those two city-states, they're positioned very close to one another, but they're also thriving and flourishing, and so they watch each other. They want to make sure the other is not at full strength. And so this was one way that Athens tried to cut the legs out from under Sparta. To control Helot revolt and uprisings, there was a annual declaration of war by the Ephors. Okay, now I'm on number 4 there at the top of page 4. And this place, it was called the Crypteia, but that was also a meeting place for the Ephors, Ephors, who would make this declaration of war against the slaves. And during this time, it was annually, it was in the fall, Spartan soldiers, often the newest ones, the youngest ones, as an initiatory rite, could kill Helots. Okay, and part of the desired results of that would be for the Helot population to remain not only physically oppressed, but also psychologically oppressed, scared of pushing back or having a revolt. And so that was a common practice, as awful as it sounds. Okay, the Ephors, I will get to them later and say more about them, but there were 7 of them in all. Now, I told you earlier there were 5. Mr. Smith can make a mistake. I know you think I'm perfect and all, but I can make a mistake. And there were 7 in all, including 2 kings. Okay, so 5 Ephors, advisors, watchdogs for the kings, and 2 kings, so 7 in all. Okay, and they're the ones who declare war on the Helots. Now, I think I shared with you that Herodotus says that Lycurgus, who we'll talk about with the Constitution in a moment, Herodotus believes that Lycurgus is who created this institution of the Crypteia. Okay? All right, so let's take a look now at the Spartan Constitution. And remember, our Constitution is supposed to provide guidance and explicitly describe the bonds of society, the interactions of political life that people would experience, and in this instance, in Sparta. Okay? All right. So it was created by Lycurgus, a Spartan king, and the Spartan government was definitely different from Athenian democracy. Okay, and while Athens had distinct branches with different responsibilities, so did the Spartans. But the way that they interacted with one another was probably a little less democratic. Okay, now there's a tradition called the Great Rhetra, okay, or the Great Proclamations, the Great Sayings, okay, and I'm going to fly by this effort slide and I'll come back to it, okay. So the Great Rhetra, the Great Sayings, the Great Proclamations is a phrase, a term for the Spartan Constitution. Okay, and there's two stories about how this Constitution existed and was applied. Um, in one sense, and this may be kind of mythic, but in one sense, Lycurgus ordered or mandated that the Constitution would be memorized. So, a couple of thoughts there. First, if it's memorized, if it's only oral to the people, then it's probably a little more difficult to hold your leaders accountable to that Constitution if it's not written down. Okay, but also on the flip side, it could be that Lycurgus knew that people would not know the rules basically if they didn't have them memorized, and since the wealthy males of the city-state would be the ones to put the Constitution together, then I kind of go with the latter, that Lycurgus wanted it memorized because he wanted people who were subject to it to know the rules and know their place. Okay. Now, there's another side to the Great Rhetra, the Great Sayings, and this is Roman numeral 6, letter B, and it is the fact that it was written down. Okay, so at Delphi, where the oracle is that all the city states could go to receive prophetic utterances from the priests, they have found, archaeologists have found, and historians have studied fragments of a document that the priests had of a Spartan constitution written in verse. Okay, so they know that at least at Delphi, maybe not with the people in Sparta, but at least at Delphi, there was a written poetic version of the Constitution. And since it was in verse, that might support the claim that it was learned orally because, learning something sing-songy or poetic would be easier than if it was written in prose. Okay? So that's a little bit about the double tradition, the oral and the written sayings or proclamations of the Spartan Constitution. Now, what are the branches of government that this Constitution described? I'm on page 5 of your outline, okay? And I'm going to come back to the F4s in just a minute, but let's go to the kings right now since they're at the top, okay? So there was a balance of power with the kings, okay? There were two of them, and this is called, check it out, look at those crowns. This was called a diarchy, okay? Two kings ruling one kingdom, okay, to provide sort of a balance of power. So one would be responsible, and I think it could change between the two, but one would be responsible if needed to go with the army and to go to war. The other would stay home and rule the affairs there, okay, in this diarchy. One goes, one stays. Roman numeral 7, letter B. So you could describe the two kings as twinned, like they're two halves of one entity, the top leader. They're inseparable, all right? They're human and they're divine. I mean, at least that's the belief. They have a certain divine right to rule. So their divinity is based on the fact that their earthly relationship is sort of like an incarnation of these celestial twins that the Spartans believed existed in the heavens, celestial twins, gods. And so the kings then are an incarnation on earth of those celestial twins, okay? The earthly incarnation of those. All right. Now, I'm going to go back to, real quick, the Ephors, okay? So this is Roman numeral 7. Sorry if my chair is squeaking a lot, but my office chair squeaks. Matter of fact, right now, I'm sitting in my oracle. The sun is out. This is Saturday, after we got out and we learned that we're going to be out of school because of the virus. And I don't know, things feel really weird right now. I read stuff and I get kind of anxious and worried. And then I don't know. I drive home, I go by Starbucks or something, and I feel a little better. But then I don't know. It's a strange time. Please know I was praying for you guys, and I'm going to miss y'all. And anyway, that was just a little time out, a little break. Okay. All right. So the F Force. Now you'll see the bulldog there, right? 5 total per year were elected. The 2 kings stayed there, but 5 total per year were elected. Limited service, 1 year. And we've talked about why, just so tyranny wouldn't occur. Basically, keeping these 7 people together longer than a year. They provided oversight of the kings. Okay, you could say they were an elected board, like a board of directors, keeping the kings in check. Okay, and they were elected by all the citizens. Okay, and that would probably mean male citizens, full citizens, male citizens. And then finally, even against their best efforts, you take that few people with very little checks on their power and put them at the top running everything, like, then you're going to end up with despots and tyrants, and that's what Plato ends up saying that this institution becomes. Lycurgus is actually credited with also creating it in the Constitution. So you'll see there, I'm bringing up on the slide, 1-year terms, elected from all citizens, and now we're moving on past the kings. That took care of the ephors, and now it is time for the Gerousia. Okay, they're the council of elders in Sparta. You have to have, if you want to make it in life, you have to have some gray-haired, wise people. Okay, that would be me, except that I don't have gray hair. I have a full head of luxurious, beautiful brown hair that makes me look like, I don't know, I'm 33 years old or something. But anyway, I digress. The Gerousia were a council of elders. One member of the Gerousia was the Gerontes. Who knows, right? I'm probably butchering these. But the Gerontes, Gerontes. Now I'm on page 6 of the outline. All right. The gender, I'm sorry, sorry, Sam, the gender, the age, and the term limit. Okay, so you had to be male to serve, you had to be over the age of 60 to serve, and once you were in, okay, it was a lifetime term, kind of like our Supreme Court appointments, except you can be younger than 60, right? Now, the total number of Gerousia was 28. But then when you put the 2 kings in, right, you have 30 in all that's in this body, the Council of Elders. All right. Interesting fact, they served a lifetime role, and they were elected by voice vote. Voice vote. So there would be men in a nearby building, and they would conduct voice vote. People would shout for the 60-year-old or older men who they wanted to serve in the Gerousia, and these other men who were in another building, they couldn't see what was going on. They would listen to hear who received the loudest cheers, and that was one way they tried to determine the vote, okay, and keep it fair. The Gerousia could be described, though, because there were these two royal houses in Sparta, and a lot of the Gerousia ended up being from those royal houses. So it's, it's dynastic, just like we've had the Clintons and the Bushes in politics for a long time, different people, um, wealthy families, that kind of thing. Same thing happens here. Two royal houses produce a lot of the Gerousia, which means family members, wealthy people, and sort of an oligarchy develops where you have rule by a wealthy few. Okay, rule by a wealthy few. All right, that's oligarchy. Now, we're almost done. I'm at the 30-minute mark. Can you believe that? 53 seconds, 54 seconds, 55 seconds. That is wild. We just need to do it like this all the time. I could sit in the back of the room. We could roll it. But who wants to just hear me lecture? I mean, what about devotions and prayer and like all of my wonderful stories, right? Okay, so Apella of the Demos. Let's take a look at that. Okay, Apella of the Demos. Demos here is equivalent to Demos, Demos, in Athens. This was the popular assembly that would have a say in the Spartan government. Okay. Now, it's a popular deliberative assembly. So Demos, the relationship to democracy is clear here. Okay. And it was open up to a wider group of participants. Who could attend? Every Spartan male who was a full citizen, age 30 or older. All right, so that's definitely very much more democratic than the Ephors, the diarchy, and the the Ephors, the diarchy, and the Gerousia. Right, much more democratic. They would meet in the agora for a while, and then move to this nearby building. All right, on the hill called the Skia, Skia. Their power eventually over time, though, because, can't have the common people making any decisions, the unwashed masses, right? So you got to check their power. And so the Gerousia eventually, there's a law in that oral constitution, right? Where the Gerousia could set aside any crooked decision of the people, any crooked decision of the people. And so that was one way they checked the democratic power of this group. Voting here, just like with the Gerousia, was assessed by voice vote, but instead of electing people, they voted on issues. They voted on issues. Issues were presented to them, and they voted on them, some of which are there. This is Roman numeral 9. Number 4, they voted on peace and war. They would vote on treaties and foreign policy. Sometimes they would vote on which king would lead a military campaign. I mean, could you imagine being the king? They never voted to go on a military campaign. Like you're kind of weak, or they think you're just a bookworm, or you know what I mean? I feel like I would never win that vote. I don't know if you can. I know you cannot imagine me not being elected to lead a country into battle, but I could see it. I could see just not being popular enough to get that vote. So, which king should lead them? They could also vote about and help settle disputes over succession, like who would then move into the throne after a king steps down or passes away. Okay? Let's see. Oh, also, along with the Gerousia and the Gerousia applying checks on their power, eventually, just, sometimes power will consolidate, concentrate, and so that's what happens. The Ephors and the presiding kings eventually begin to control the Apella of the Demos. Okay? So, I hope you enjoyed that introduction. It's almost at 35 minutes now. And like I said, I miss you guys. I'm praying for you be sure you have that outline. You're able to take notes and fill it out. I will be also uploading a study guide, and I'm still thinking through the format for the test, like how we'll take a test, where I'll have it, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'll be in touch about the test. Love you guys. Go Knights.